Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. We're happy to have you for a pre-Purim episode. And this one has been sponsored anonymously in memory of Mitzuda Bat Moshe, whose yahrzeit was recently 29 Chavtes Adar Aleph. May this year be an aliyah for her neshama, and this year is going to be all about banging during Haman. Some people like it. Some people can't get enough of it. Some people want to run out of shul. You have different rabbis putting up different signs, different papers of how our minhag is and what we have to do. So Rabbi Brut's going to talk about exactly what the origins are, what different minhagim are, and where this came about.
Okay, so we're going to be tracing the pros and cons of making noise when Haman's name is mentioned throughout the generations. Okay, so everyone knows a few weeks before Purim. If you don't know Purim's coming, you hear Purim is coming, with all the cap guns and other loud noisemakers that children have because they're preparing for the chanas, for when during the laning of Megillah, when they make all the noise. It's similar to Shloishim Yom Kodim HaChag. You learn the halacha, so they're machmir to prepare and make sure they're ready to make the noise. Okay, so I would like to trace all of the story of this minhag throughout the generations. So before to begin, so to speak, I like to quote from the Gedolei HaPoskim, both the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan. Commenting on the Ramah in Siman Tafresh Tzaddik, where the Ramah brings down this minhag, so says the Mishnah Berurah, he brings down Lamashal, the Maril did not bang by Haman. Then he brings down that the Rabbi Yaakov Emden says his father would stamp with his feet. Okay. And then the Pri Megadim says that those that bang, it confuses people. And then the Mishnah continues in the next sif, and he says, when you do bang, the chazan should be quiet because then you're going to miss Haman's. And basically he said he's not too pro the banging of Haman's in the next sif. That's what he comes out because it's going to cut matzim which we know the chazan tries. He waits, then he says Haman, and they say it again. They bang again, so basically people could miss. And even though you're going to make up by trying the psukim that the words you miss, you're going to fall behind, etc., etc. So he's not into it at all. The banging. Okay. Similarly, the Aruch HaShulchan, who also brings down, and he says a lashon that it's a minhag kadmain, which we'll be discussing. He says lemaisa, if it comes to this, that yizru lebli lahakes bekoilos beitzim gedolim muvalbelim hamagila. If let's say you can't get the crowd to be quiet, we know there's any by the Megillah that there's something called Roiv Am. Over here, no. If the bill is going to be too great, then you should not hear it in the shul where there's too much noise. Okay, so these are the two Gedolei HaPoskim, and we're going to get back to discussing more about this shortly. Okay, now, like I always just point out, I'm not going to give a long list of the bibliographical information of who discusses this minhag, but Lamashal, Rabbi Gedalia Oberlander in his beautiful sefer Minhag Aveseinu B'Yodenu has a nice piece on this where he goes through the Rishonim and he sets up the sugya very nicely. And like everything else, there's always some booklets, contrasim about it. So in 1947, Yom Tov Lunsky put out a work called Ketzad Haku Es Haman B'Tfutzas Yisrael, where he traces all different aspects of how it was done throughout the ages, about a 100-page booklet. And later on, Professor Sperber, who also wrote a lot about this minhag, he put out a booklet called Ketzad Makam Es Haman, where he also talks about the origins of the minhag and different aspects. And he also has a whole catalog dealing with a collection in one of the museums here in Eretz Yisrael of Gragers, dealing with all these types of stuff. Okay, so that's just to throw out there some of the sources about the actual origins of the minhag that helped me in preparing this discussion. Okay, now, Lamaisa, what's the source? Where does it come from? Is there anywhere to start from? So, Baruch Hashem, we have Rishonim over here that have discussion of this minhag. So there's a Sefer HaManig, and the Sefer HaManig Okay, so he says like this: Mashanagu with Sarfat, Acha Kriyas Megillah. After they lay in the Megillah, Loimer Aru Haman Varurim Banav. You basically say some type of thing which says in it are Haman and Arum Banav, Baruch Mordechai Brucha Esther. So he says, where is this coming from? He says, State in Yerushalmi, Megillah, Masechta Seifrim, Bereshis Rabbah. It talks about it. Then what does it say there? Rav Amar Tzarech Sheyomer Ara Haman Varurim Banav. V'Amar Pinchas Tzarech Sheyomer Chavayne Zachal Toiv. And so we see that in various early sources, which he's pointing to, Yerushalmi, Masechta Seifrim, the Medrash Rabbah, says something to the effect that that on Purim you say Ar Haman Varu Banav. Okay. At this point, we don't know yet what it exactly says over there. Then he continues, and then he says that then he would say he would basically Rabbi Yochanan would curse Nebuchadnezzar's name when we say it in the Megillah Nebuchadnezzar, a Rasha. He would curse him out. Okay, and then he continues. And then he says, what was the minig? There's a concept called Zeichel Tzadik Levracha. Whenever you mention a tzaddik's name, we say Zatzal Mashal, because to give a bracha, so to speak. What do we do by a Rasha? V'shem, V'sham, Yarkiv. Okay. This is based on a pasuk in Mishlei. So cursed, when we mention a Rasha's name, we say a lot of times Yimach Shemai, etc., etc. Okay, now, says the Manig, Alkei, Minagantinoikis Bitzarfa to Provencio, Lekachas Chaluke, Nachal, Luchtov Aleim, Haman, Makshinan Zilazu, Kishakari Maskir, Haman, Virashu, Vishem Risham, Yaakov, Vishalim. So it sounds like what happens like this. After he just got finished saying, based on the Medrash and the Masechta Sai from the Yerushalmi, that there's such a thing of saying Ar Haman Varum Banav, this which was said when at the end of the Megillah. But what about during the Megillah? The children had this minig that they would prepare Haman's name and they would bang when they said Haman during the Megillah to wipe it out. Now the question is, at this point, was this? It sounds like Shakayra Maskir Haman. It sounds like all Hamans. Okay, this is the lashon of the manik. Now we will get to, just to be brief, and then we'll go more to explain the Makairis that he mentioned. Lamashal, there's a Archas Chaim from Reb Aaron HaKohen Milonil, who also talks about this, and he throws in, it's als Macha Timcha Zeicha Malik. But he does not specify if it was done. It's not clear if it was done during the Megillah. It could be it was done on Purim. Okay, fine. There's Avodraham about it. There's a Sefer Asufis about it. But then the Shibali Aleket, when he talks about it, he says that people in Italy had the minig, people, note to Lashon, not the children dafka, of stamping their feet, banging stones, and breaking pots. And to particularly thank Hashem for saving Klal Yisrael. He says it's not a chiyuv, it's a nice custom, but according to his lashon, it sounds like it was done by who? Even the adults. This is in the Shibali Haleket, Aru Haman, Aru Zerish, Makim Biragleyan, Oyeven al Evan, Mushabrin Kedeiros. Okay, so Bekitzer, here we're seeing it's no longer with the children. But then another source from Italy, another early Rishon, an early Italian source of a Rishon, Sefer Tadir says, it sounds like the children were the one who were Zohar in this mitzvah to break pots when Haman and Zeresh's name were mentioned. Now, but the point is, from the Shibali HaLeket and this Sefer Tadir, it sounds like this was done during the Megillah. Okay, because as I said, from the Archas Chaim, it wasn't clear. There's a different early source, one of the Machzer Keminig Roima, printed in 1485. They would smash pots after the Megillah, but during the Megillah, they would just stamp their feet. So it sounds like some type of it depends when it was and depending on that time, what was done. Okay. So far, we're seeing a minig that either ties back to a pasuk in Mishlei that whenever you mention a shame of a Rasha, you're supposed to curse it. So here, what they did was they would bang or smash pots. And another point was who was doing it. Was it the children or even the adults? And someone else, L'mashal, the Archas Chaim brings in its Machatim Chazeicha Amalek. It's another nakuda of this, another, so to speak, reason for behind this banging or making noise or whatever it is that you do during Haman's name. Okay, it's during the reciting of Haman's name. Okay, going further in the timeline, we find that. Okay, so now let me just backtrack for 1 minute, and that is already we quoted the Manig, and the Manig brings in that there's a Yerushalmi about this, there's Masechta Seifrim about this, and there's a Medrash about it. As a Medrash, a lot of times, as it tends to be in these type of situations, there's many different neschais in the various places in the Medrash, and it's unclear. One thing is clear: when that Rabbi Yochanan would curse when Nebuchadnezzar's name was said during the Megillah. That seems to be the consensus. Okay, now, what about earlier? What about saying Haman? So does it mean, according to any of these early sources, that during the Megillah, when Haman's name was said, that also someone would say Shem Hashem Yaakov or curse it out? That is up to debate. And depending on the various nuschais of the various midrashim, it sounds like there is makam that even when every time one would say the name of Haman, Harasha, you curse him out, say it, which is significant, Shem Risham Yaakov, while the Megillah is being said. Okay, I'm not going to get into all the different nuschais in all these sources, which I keep on saying, the Yerushalmi, the Midrashim, and Masechta Seifrim, but one wants to see Lamashal Rav Dov Beretner in Ahavat Tzim Yerushalayim on the Yerushalmi Megillah has a few pages of quotes of Rishonim. Rabbi Yisachar Tamar's beautiful work on Yerushalmi has a few nice pages about this. And Lamashal, if you look at Rav Zev Einhorner's Parish on the Medrash, also over here shows the different nuschais, depending, and it could be what's going on in the different things. Is it a hefsek? So if it could be maybe when Nebuchadnezzar is cursing him out one time, that's not a big hefsek. Whereas to say Haman every single time when Haman's name's to mention, to curse it out, to curse him out, to say the peh, Shem Risham, that's a problem. Okay. Anyway, fine. We go further. So the point is that already it's being pointed out in these early sources, something is up, that there's a possibility at least to be doing to say Shem Risham Yaakov even during the Megillahs, to curse out when every time Haman's name is mentioned during the Megillah. Okay. Now, it seems that basically what we do is at the end, and this is coming from all this, is already looking in the Torah, and the Shulchan Aruch brings from there, and various Rishonim, is at the end of the Megillah, at night, we have a piyut, Asher Hineni, and we basically, in the piyut, Asher Hineni, which is famous, at the end of it, it has Sheshanas Yaakov. That's where we do Arar Haman Uvanov. That's when we're cursing out Haman's name. Because possibly Alta Hefsek. We don't want to say it every time the name is mentioned. But we do say it when this piyut is mentioned at the end of the Megillah. At night, it's only said at night. Sheshanas Yaakov is said during the day. But this seems to be a very early piyut. A lot to discuss about this piyut, but the point is that that's what's going on in this piyut. We're being mekayim, this Yerushalmi / Medrash / Masechta Seifrim l'chol hapachos, not to do it like Rabbi Yochanan with Nebuchadnezzar, but at least to be saying that it's out Shem Risham Yaakov. Okay. Now, when we go further, Lamashal, if you go further down the line, so we have the Maril. So the Maril, what did he do? We know he's very important, Lamashal, for the Ramah, his Minhagim. It sounds like he did not bang when they would say Haman's name. Okay, the Ramah brings this down in his Darkei Moshe, but Lamaisa, we might touch on a little later on some other Mahalchim with the Maril. But interestingly enough, in the manuscripts, the fancy edition of the Maril, one manuscript that sounds like the son says that his father did bang when Haman's name was mentioned. Okay, anyway, be that as it may, Lamaisa, the Ramah over here brings down in Siman Tafresh Tzadik the Rishonim, and he says like this. We'll just quote it because this is the source, and this is very important over here. He says, "Ay kasvu shenaga tinaikas lotzor tzuras Haman." They made a picture of Haman al itzim havanim. Ay lichtov shem Haman, or they would write the name of Haman ulakais in the bang zel zek deish yimcha shmai al derech macha timcha zecher hamalek. That's one reason. This shem Risham Yaakov. So he's combining two umizen nishtarviv haminik shemakin Haman kishakayin hamagila bebeis hakneses. So it does not sound like one time. It sounds like multiple times. So now what's coming out is that we are doing some form of the Yerushalmi slash Masechta Seifrim slash Medrash of similar to what Rabbi Yochanan did when he cursed Nebuchadnezzar. It's being done in a different form, not with an Amira, but with a Pa'ula of what? Of the banging. Now, but the Ramah, who's doing it according to the Ramah? If you look carefully, the Ramah brings down Hatinaikis. Okay. So the Ramah, we know Kedarka is, where does it come from? You look in the Darkei Moshe, he has Archas Chaim, he has Zahav Draham, he has other Rishainim, okay, Manik, etc. Then the Ramah says, he also brings down the Maril. The Maril didn't, which is interesting. Even though the Maril is very important for him, anyone we know from all over our Chaim how important the Maril is, and Maril didn't do it, he's still bringing down, you should do it. And the Ramah goes even further, he adds in the following sentence, don't, in general, a minig that doesn't make sense to you, don't make fun of it because there's a reason behind it. And he specifically brings this down over here in Hilchos Purim. Now, already it's interesting is the Beis Yosef, the Mechaber doesn't bring down this minig, but in the Beis Yosef he does bring down the Archas Chaim, who we quoted already has some form of a minig of doing this. Okay, why he doesn't bring it down in Shulchan Aruch, I don't know. But the point is, state the Ramah to yes, to do it. Now, not only that, but as I said, the Ramah is concerned with pointing out that you might think, don't make fun of minhagim. Is it a general thing? Is there something going on specifically over here that he says it? Because he doesn't write this all the time whenever there's some minig that he's bringing it down. Okay, so we'll try to understand that in a few minutes. Now, there's a Levush. The Levush says over here, he says, Haman, whenever his name is mentioned, Yoimer Hashomeya Shem Risham Yarkiv. So the adult, what is he supposed to do? And now we know, there's Makairis for this Levush. The Noyag that they do, Lenakshesh, Shem Haman, Bechulu, and then he brings down Yesh Tzmach Lezeh, he brings Shem Al Shem Risham Yarkiv, Ve Machat Emche Zecher Amalek. And then he says, that they bang. Okay. And then he brings another remez, and then he says the same thing as the Ramah. He specific, but the Ramah says as a general statement about certain minhagim, the Levush takes it further and says, on this minig that you might think is something weird about it, don't say anything, and yes, to do the minute. But what's fascinating for us is the Levush says an interesting thing. What about the adult? So it comes according to him, it's clear the children will do the banging. Al Shem Risham Yaakov. What about the adult? Says the Levush. Kishakayra Shem Haman Yoimer Hashemeya Shem Risham Yaakov. And Chayra Alpi Pashtus, that sounds like every single time. So this is a fascinating thing. El Chayra a hefsek, and Lamaisa, when you look into Paiskim, they're very nervous of all types of hefsek, and there's a whole and we said when I already began, the whole thing already was with the Mishnah and the Aruch HaShulchan, if there's a hefsek and the noise, and you're going to be concerned, and the Prima Gadam handles it over here, and Reb Shlomo Cook, it tutzach in the tumult in the Paiskim over here about this, that there's a great concern of hefsek. Yet on the other hand, when you learn the early sources, the Medrash, Yerushalmi, you see that there was some type of thing that they did say Al Shem Risham Yaakov, and the Levush Lamaisa says to do it. Now, comes along the Magen Avram. What does the Magen Avram say over here? He brings down this Levush, and then he says, V'ayin berabba b'megillah gabi Nebuchadnezzar. So l'chayra pashtus, what the Magen Avram seems to be doing is he's telling us there's a medrash. You might ask me, it's a hefsek. On the medrash, we see that that's what they did. So what are you supposed to do? So it's a shtarka makar for the Levush. And we know this already as we learned the sugi, because we started with the early origins. Lamaisa over here, if you look in the Sharet Tzion says like this. I didn't bring this down the thing because and not only that, the Mishnah Berurah is bothered. You might say that maybe it's mutter. Why he throws out? And he brings him a car from that earlier. But he says no. You should not. At the end of the day, he says no. He doesn't. You should not do it. So it's interesting. He tells you might. Why am I not bringing down the Levush Magen Avram? And yet, what happens is the Maisa, he even throws out a hesber. What could possibly be a heter in it? But more than that, the Magen Avram brings him a car for the Medrash, for the Levush, from the Medrash, from the Yerushalmi. That sounds like everyone says, everyone's masking Rabbi Yochanan did it, and the only shaila is if it was also done when they said all the names Haman in the Megillah, or we waited till after the Megillah. Okay. Now, the Ma'isa, what's pshat in the Magen Avram? The Machzah Shekel might, if you look carefully, the Machzah Shekel might sound like he has a whole different mahalach in the Magen Avram. But Pashtus, what's going on over here is like this: that the Ramah and the Magen Avram are two chiburim that they're very, very interested in minhagim. We find Lamashal, the Darkei Moshe brings in tons of material from the Maril, what the Minhagim Maril was, and he brings from the Chibur of Isaac Terna and the Hisafis in the Chibur of Isaac Terna. And similarly, the Magen Avram, many times we find him handling him in Hagim and bringing Tamim from Hagim. Now, so both these two works, interestingly enough. So first, the Ramah, we already said over here, says a general thing that you might think, Minhagim, don't worry about Minhagim. I mean, he says that if you're going to make fun of Minhagim, don't you dare make fun of a minhag, because there's usually something behind it. He says it specifically over here. And not only at the Magen Avram, in the next, right afterwards, he has a whole arichos about all different types of things of Hilchos Minhagim. And he says, if there's a makar, don't worry about it. Now, what's going on? What's up is the Magen Avram decides to park over here and have a huge arichos, all different pratim and Minhagim, which a lot of times the paiskim they handle from all the makars the Magen Avram has over here. The answer is because you might think, and we're going to see, that some people are against this minig, says the Magen Avram, says the Ramah, or the Levush Lamashal. There's a makar, an early makar, Shteta Medrash, that Itaka was mafsik with an amira. So we are seeing it's not like the Sharatzin. Interestingly enough, even in the Be'er Halacha, it's clear there's if you look carefully in the Be'er Halacha, where he's talking about in Yanim and Minig based on the Pesach Tshuva. Also, you see he's taking a strong stance in Minig based on Chasam Sofer. But it's interesting is that the Magen Avram clearly, the Ramah clearly, and they have Makairis, because that's what he's bringing in a big deal, that there's a medrash, there's an early source for it. Once there's early Makairis for it, it's a game changer in understanding a minute. Now, what's so interesting is like this. What is this? It's a hefsek l'chayrim. So just to throw this out there, and then we'll move on, which is like this. There's a famous psak. There was a story, it's Kiddush Levana. It seems in a certain city they weren't able to do Kiddush Levana until Mamish, they didn't see the Levana the whole time. And what happens? They're in the middle of laying the Megillah, and if someone comes in and says, there's a Megillah sighting. Oh, what are you supposed to do? You should wait. But if they wait, there's a big fear that they're not going to be able to Mekayim Kiddush Levana that month. And they're in the middle of the Megillah. So Noam Yehuda was asked. Now I don't know. Obviously, when Yehuda was asked the Shaila, they couldn't send the Shaila to him in the middle of the Megillah, right? It's not they didn't have internet, telephones, etc. But the point was, the Noam Yehuda has this fascinating tshuva, which has other chidushim also, where he says yes, taka to stop and say do Kiddush Levana. Now over there, he talks about if it's just a few Yechidim or if it was the whole Tzibur didn't hear it, that makes a big difference. Just for a few Yechidim, you wouldn't stop. But whatever it is, a fascinating Chuvas Noam Yehuda. It's one of the first Noam Yehudas I ever learned inside as early years in high school. Anyway, now L'mais over here. Ephraim Zal Margol is both in Shari Tshuva and in Shari Ephraim, he brings it down. But the point that I'm trying to bring out from over here is, you see, look, even Kiddush Levana is a hefsek be'emtza, the laning of the Megillah for Kiddush Levana. Anyway, so now the Magen Avram is going with this, and that's what he's saying with the Levush. Taka, there is a Makar, same Shem Rishon Yaakov. But we see the Mishnah Berurah is clearly passing not like this, and you see from the Aruch HaShulchan and from other places they're very nervous out to have six Shabbat. Okay, obviously this is not at all halach l'maisa, just to bring out a point. Now, but the point is, but what's the banging? The banging is, okay, not a mira, but I'm doing a pula. So is that a hefsek? I'm making noise. Okay. This is obviously other shilas related. Okay, now, just like everything else, was there any opposition to this minig? So I'm already alluding to when I'm saying that the Ramah and the Magen Avram Dafka make a stance to say that that Dafka don't. Over here, they talk about minig and the significance of minig, and if there's a minig, it is usually going to have something behind it. Interestingly enough, there's a Chibur Maglei Tzedek, which is an early work. It's a little before the Ramah. It's a machzer. And in this machzer, he put in many different halachas, so a very chashuv chibur, and actually it was very rare. The Magen Avram has it and uses it. That's a lot of times they find the Rosh Tevis Mem tzaddik is the Magli tzaddik, and also the Ramah, it seems, might have had this. Okay, it's very possible he did have it and used it, but this is beyond this discussion. So here he has all Arichos bringing down the Rishalmi and the Manig and other Makairis about this. Then he says, when we have a lot of times he's been hugging, but he says, Lafisha b'chol davar dar, oindem aleinu l'chaloi seinu, and the Goyim always looking for us is sakana, and we find certain times, because of sakana, Chazal were mevatel certain things, the Chash sakana, the chamir sakanta me isura. For example, ner Chanukah b'shas sakana, and other different things. He gives examples. We see by Tekiah Shaifer they were mevatel certain aspects, etc., etc. So he says also over here with this minig of banging, it gets out of control, and it makes us a tzchaik for the goyim and everything, and therefore he was against. He wanted to abolish the minig of banging by Haman because of this. Now that could be, it's like what I'm saying now is that these two work, the Magen Avram and the Ramah were aware of it. They're handling the Maglit Tzedek. Now, interestingly enough, the Maglit Tzedek continues and he talks about there's a Hailulus in Purim Bechlal. So he was and we know in other minhagim of Purim and Bechlal, you'll always find discussions in Purim. Once the halacha allowed simcha, and let's say getting drunk, and then you'll find that paiskim are handling that it could get out of control, and that's exactly what happened throughout the generations, all the different minhagim. So the Magli Tzedek already is trying to say, no. We should be careful. He brings precedent where we see, especially because he brings in Alts the Goyim and this type of stuff, dafka, to stop the minig of banging. Okay. This is the manic. This is the Magli Tzedek. Now, much later on, I found the Mashal Yaakov Reifman, a famous maskil, brings in a newspaper article. Again, Goyim are going to be mezalzel in us. They're going to make fun. It's going to bring attention to the Goyim. All these types of reasons. It's brought up by various Makairis throughout the generations. And this gets into a whole deeper discussion, which needs a lot of clarification, which is how to look at when there's something called the Gullus Jew. When you're in Gullus, you should be careful how you act, not to bring extra attention to yourself. And this obviously plays out tremendous today in what is the media and all these types of things. Should we defend ourselves? Should we be quiet? Different kufas in generation, we find they were very scared with the Xeris of the Goyim, what they could end up doing. So they kept, as they would call it, a low profile. So this is similar what you see different times. So as far as Purim also, this is what really is behind this Magli Tzedek. This is Rabbi Reifman and other Makairis. Lamaisa, the Mashal, and there's many sources for this. I'm just going to quote one. It gets out of control. So Avram Chaim Na, in his newspaper articles that he used to write in the Hamodia way back, which was collected in a volume recently, a Ksais HaShulchan Haaretz Lamaisa. So there he says that he describes how one of the shuls, the smoke was geferlich, and it causes basically people loot from all the different gadgets that the kids do. So it ends up causing that the whole Megillah, everything, it causes problems. Anyway, there's a long list of Makairis about this, and we find other times that people also, other Makairis of Yidden that tried to abolish it. There's an autobiography I'm very fond of, Pauline Weingroff. Her father was a Rav Epstein who was Zaycha to learn B'chavrusa with the Nachas David. He also learned in Valazhin for a few years, and he also seemed to try to abolish it in his other such Makairis. But L'mashal, just one Maramakam, I used to see Rebbe Yashiv the few times I was in the Megillah laning by him. He didn't stop it. He let them. Okay, fine. Anyway, Lamaisa, is there some type of compromise? So yes, it seems this is a well-known thing. Sometimes we attempt to do compromises. So the Knes HaGdolah brings down that some would only do the banging when the names of Haman and his children were said. Only then did they do it. And this could be shot in certain of the Rishayim. It wasn't done every Haman. Okay, Lamaisa. Also, Rav Yosef Shemesh brings down such a thing. It was only during the Asaras B'nai Haman. Lamaisa, the Ben Ish Chai, also says that only during Asaras B'nai Haman, and it seems there were other Makairis of such a thing, but like everything else, not always was this accepted. Now, another interesting, back to the Ram Chaim, no, he says, what's Pshat? Famous thing we say Asaras B'nai Haman. So he says, because Dafka there, the minig was, even in other places that didn't bang Haman, they would try to do it just over there. So because of that, to be mavalbal, and the kids were being banged so much, to make sure you said everything, they would say the names of the children out loud. That's where the minhag came from, because this was taka the place, like the Knesset Gdolah Mashal, that when they would bang for Haman. Anyway, we could find and we could list out different places of getting out of control and to stop it, but we're not going to list all of it out. Just one cute marmakam is the Sefer Kundis, which is a parody type of work, which is appropriate for Purim, but we're not going to discuss it by Riches what this work is. But basically, in 1824, this guy writes, he's talking about Purim, so he writes that the kundis, the trickster, basically the kid that makes all the trouble and everything, he must bang with all his strength for a long time every time Haman's name is mentioned, until he's either thrown out or quieted down. If he gets thrown out due to his long banging, hareza meshubach, and he must scream welcome, and he even screams when Haman's name is said. Okay, this is just a thing there's numerous makairis throughout our sources of people that we see that even with all the paiskim and all the different things, what we know, the minhag survives and thrives. Okay. Now, the question is, what are the reasons behind this minhag, and maybe to even explain the tzad shabai behind this Ramam / Magen Avram, Levush, and to maybe give some insight. So before we get there, just to mention 2 or 3 other reasons, and then we'll just say one mahalach to attempt to explain something what's going on in this minute. Recently, actually almost a year ago, my friend Rabbi Yaakov Stahl, so he discovered a unique minhag mentioned in a manuscript from which he is able to date to 1429. He doesn't know who the author is, but basically like this. He says this manuscript says like this: Makin ala Evan bepurim kishakarin Haman. They bang with stones on Purim when they say Haman. Why? So he didn't have enough money. So what did he have to do? He had to go to all the people that used to make the coins. They had to make. So it was a lot of banging. People asking, what's the tumult? Why is there so much banging of metal for money to be created? So what's interesting is like this. Basically, is this period, because of what happened, that Haman said he's going to give this large sum of money. So there was a big rash in the area, around the palace, I guess, of Achashverosh. So because of that, because of this banging, it became the bang during Haman. What's going on over here? So in this article, which I'm more than happy to send out a PDF if someone requests, Rabbi Stahl goes into the way coins were made and the cheshbonis of how much money this sum of Asaris Alaf and Kikar Kesef was a very large sum of money, and how it was made, and the coin making. And Kitzur, he's mefarish. He analyzes in depth the different aspects to explain Ada Seif all what's going on behind this minhag, and he also gives some interesting background to the minhag Bechlal in an 18-19 page article, which I'm more than happy to share. I'm just mentioning it to throw out there some very weird reason behind it. That's number 1. Okay. Number 2 is, and this just to go back to what we said earlier, not only is it the levush, a lot of times. So okay, I'm showing you it's showing it's back in the medrash. This is really what's going on with the Ramah. This is going on with the Magen Avram. Okay, but Lamaisi, even Rabbi Avram Kleisner, who's the Rebbe, the Maril, and / Reb Yitzchak Eterna, he brings down. He says, Pasha, Kol HaMaskir Sarasha Tzarch L'Kaloi V'Lo Meshem Misham Yarkev V'Ata K'Shemaskir Nes Mordechai Omer Tzibur Belachash Zecher Tzadik L'Vracha U'K'Shemaskir Shem Haman Omer Shem Misham Yarkev. So you see, like the Levush, really, that the Mishnah Berurah doesn't want to bring down. He didn't have this Rebbe Avram Kleisner. It was very rare sefer. Because the children don't know. So okay, and he brings down a Zazach, and it's also found in the Hagoyim and Hagim on Rabbi Isaac Turner. So now, to throw out 2 nekudas with this, we keep on saying this Shem Risham Yarkiv. What's going on about Shem Risham Yarkiv that you mentioned, the name the Russia? Okay, so I'm not going to go into this in depth. However, if you Lamashal, one Marmakim Kedai to see is the Chidah and his Perish Masechta Seifrim has a discussion about this, and one other Marmakim is there's a beautiful Chibur on Medrash Nezar Kodesh. Recently, a few years ago, was published in a fancy edition by Mechon Zichron Aaron. So over there in the Medrash and Vayera, which has this Medrash, which is one of the Makairos of this thing of that Rabbi Yochanan would curse during the Megillah. So first he brings down over here, based on the Rambam and Shmeina Prakim, that there's an akuda roy l'shvacha chashuvim b'malasam. You're supposed to praise the chashuva people with their things, and kedei lahativ manigayim b'nei b'nei adam, to make people look up to these people, and to the opposite for bad people. So you should not look up to people that are bad. So too over here. That's why we say that's going on when we say Zecher Tzadik Levracha, that we're mentioning similar to this Rambam, we're to look up to the tzaddik. Then he brings down further. He handles about when you curse a Rasha, is it only when he's alive and he's not? That plays out ground over here. Also, we're not going to go into that. Then he says another nakuda with a bracha is you do in the Gemara al tiberches hadikal beinecha. So even though he's dead, the tzaddik yesh tay loy tay elis bebracha lis alis mimadrigase b'shar she'elyon. Now Kabbalah he brings from Mekamelech. There's such a thing he can go up. So too, that goes on over here. After you it adds to the klala. Okay, and he has some other fascinating nukudis in this aspect, and that's what is behind, so to speak, in the cursing out of when you mention Risham's names. Now, Lamashal, we know that we say when we refer to we have this person. I'm stuck how to say it in English. Anyway, Yashka. So how do we refer to him? Yeshu. So it's brought down. What's Yeshu? The Rasha Tevis Yemach Shemai V'Zichrei. Okay, that's an interesting idea. One other nakuda with this is that is the piyutim of the Kalir for Parsha Zachar. There's a piyut Zachar-ish, I believe it's called, and in there, all the stanzas at the end of each stanza, which is talking about a Rasha, we would say Yemach Shemai V'Zichrei V'Nimach Zichrei Melaskiroi B'Zichron Kodesh, and throughout the piyut of the Kalir, this was inserted each time, each set of stanzas. There's something when you're saying a Rasha, Yemach Shemai V'Zichrei, and Lamais, many Yidden are very mahader in such a thing, which is perfectly a good thing to do. Now, going on with the reasoning behind this minig, so I've quoted in the past a very interesting work, Kaf Naki from Rapalpi Malka. This work was in manuscript until very recently, but the Chida, we know different materials of this work because of the Chida. So he talks, Lamashal, about our minig of banging. He says, what's going on behind it? The Chida brings this down also. But now that we have the whole Lashon, we can see more. Lamaisi says, people, the children, especially the small children, but even Gedolim, they bang and they make a whole thing. And it's Kilu Haman's in front of us. And he says don't make al v'chol, and people are going to make fun of us. So he says like this, they saw how long this galus is. And there's going to be another oppressor come up against us. And everyone's going to hear about it. And they tell it to their kids. And he says, not only that, historically there was such a thing. So basically, we make just the opposite of what I am quoting earlier from the Magli Tzedek. It's the Goyim. No, we want even the Goyim to hear this, to show, what's the business? Why is there a rash? The Jews are making a rash. No, there was a whole story. Haman wanted to destroy them, and then he lost out. And what happened? He was killed, etc., hung in this situation. He was hung, v'chulu v'chulu. So Memela, some goyim might all of a sudden back off from an exeris that they might have wanted to do against the Yid. Okay, this is what the Kafnaki says, and Lamaisa is also a chibur, the Shem Tov Katan from Shem Tov from Kesser Shem Tov from Rav Gagin. He also says this himself in a little differently. But the point is that anti-Semites, they might want to whatever Chepas. So when they hear this rash, so it's sort of like if this is actually playing out the ghost true point that I mentioned earlier. There's different ways. So some people might say no, it might affect the Maglit Tzedek, or let's say much later on Reifman, and other people, they held no, it could make it, and it probably depended on which areas you lived in and what the goyim, they were like at the time, and they would say no, don't make a big deal, don't make your presence known even. This plays out lamashal. Okay, we're not going to give any mashal, not to go off on any tangents, but the point is, whereas the kafnaki or lamashal this Rav Gagin, the point was just the opposite, to make the rash so everyone would be talking about it, and then they would possibly back off from chapping the Jews. Okay, anyway, we say that these are some of the reasons, just to be Messiah with one last reason, and that's like this. I keep on saying the Ramah, the Magen Avram, they're Meirich about them and Hagim Dafka over here. Now, there's another thing which people still do to today, is they would make a mak Haman and they would hang it. Brought down, this binning is brought down as early as the Aruch, and they would hang it and they would dance around it, and it's brought down a bunch of Rishainim. Okay, so we see there was some type of thing with Hamans, and with the children, they would sort of like reenact even, I guess, the Hamans. Okay. There's a general minig which is brought down in numerous sources. Many people have heard of it. It's very, very famous, but one of the earliest sources is in the Sefer Kava Yashar, which was a extremely, extremely popular work published in Yiddish, Hebrew over 80 times in 1705, 1706. And he brings down, whenever they would test out a pen, he would write the name of Haman or Amalek, and he would say, and he would erase it, and he would say, "Oh, I mean, Makai Machatimcha Zecha Amalek." This also got more popular because of the Sefer Zechira from Reb, which I spoke about in the Shir about David, who also brings this down from the Kava Yashar. So basically, things were done. The hanging of the Haman, not only the banging of Haman, the hanging of a Haman, a Mak Haman, and all this is Al Machay Timcha Zecher Amalek and Shem Risham Yirka. What's going on behind this? Is there any way to explain this? Possibly. So I came across a tshuva from a Yid, Rebbe Yisrael, David Yafa Schlesinger, or Margolis, however you want to say his name. And he was a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, and he was a known loichem against different, when people were mezalzelim and hagim, he was a known loichem to defend it. And in various of his kontresim and his chiburim, that's exactly what he does. He goes to defend it. So he has a tshuva in his tshuva sefer Mili Da'avis, Siman Yud Gimel, where he deals with this topic. Okay. So basically, someone wrote him a shaila about banging of clapping by Aravas by Hoshana Rabbah and the banging of Haman on Purim. He says not only that, what's happens is given to the children. Why is it done dafka during Megillah laning? Because it's mevalbal the listeners, and we really should stop it. That's what this guy asked this Rav Margolis. Now, anyone who knows Rav Margolis, as I gave the Hagdama a moment ago, he's the wrong guy to ever start. If you ever mention a minig and you try to be mevatel, he's the wrong guy, so to speak. And obviously, this has to do with the historical period of time where the reformers and were actually actively being mevatel, different menhagim, and there was a great battle going on in his regions, and that's why he was very sensitive to such a thing. Anyway, because he has a massive tshuva on the topic, a beautiful tshuva, where he tries to give insight behind this great minig. And he says, so I'm just going to quote a few pieces from it, and that's how we'll end. He says like this: we know mitzvahs say of Zechiras Amalek. Now in the Torah it says Zachar, so you could say, oh, it's good enough to do b'machshava, but the Gemara says also some type of concept of dibur. Now a maisa shenase b'poyel to sky mazachira yoser. If you do something a maisa, you remember things better. So he says like this: when you lay in the Megillah, banging is a siman of milchama. Okay. So what we want is mahusa inyan lekayin mechia b'poyel. Now he's not saying. He says, don't think I'm saying that banging Haman is minatayra. But I want to show, he says, that the mechias ha'adam oisu mekayim mitzvahs hasei zachar, and the banging is one of the nakudas. He says, bichlal, the whole concept behind Megillas Esther saying it is for mitzvahs hasei of mechias Amalek. So he says, you're going to say a lot of times you could space out at such like this. You space out during the Megillah laning. So with the banging, you're remembering what you're doing over here. You're remembering. You're also being Isaac and Mechias Amalek, and therefore, so it's not just a Zachar, but Akar Megillah Yiskar. If you just would say it, it wouldn't be enough. So you're being Mekayim it with the Pula. A very cute thing. He goes on. This is dafka with the children also because the Gzeir also affected the children, and Amalek didn't have mercy on the children. He deals with that also. Okay, now he throws out there, what's happens to Maril? The Maril doesn't do it, and the Ramah brings it down. So he suggests maybe is because the Maril himself didn't do it, but he let the kids do it. Now, interestingly enough, it seems that this Milidavis knew the Ramshik, which makes sense, and he told this to Ramshik, and the Ramshik was not happy about this. Ramshik says, no, this minig, where do you find that the minig is with Gedalim? Now, the truth is, we saw earlier that there's a possibility that it is with Gedalim also, depending on the different Nuschayis of the Rishayim. But anyway, the point is, it's for children. Now, he goes further. He says, and we'll get back to the children aspect with him in a second. He goes further with this. Then he throws out this similar I brought down from the Kavayasha with the when you would test out a pen. So he says, Remartcha, my rabbi would do this because now, so certainly, so because of the pu'ulas, they have an effect. So now, like this, when you lay in the Megillah, be'etzem, we don't want you to be Masach Das. We want you to be focusing on the nace. And more so, he goes on and he says that we know we're supposed to lay in the Megillah like an Igeris. What does this mean? Because if you stop in the middle of the Megillah, you might not realize the nace. The nace is only because of all these events put together, he shows. That punct, all the different things happened, we see that someone was causing all this. A greater up above Hashem Yisbarach. And if there would be a hefsek, you might not, this aspect you could touch up this way, and this aspect touch up this way. But the point is, when you put it all together, that's what's behind, say, laying the Megillah like the Yigeris. So what's going to be? So he says, Belamaisa, we find that when you lay we find that we have 7 aliyahs when you lay in Kriyas HaTorah also. He says part of the Nakuda is to because it's hard to listen for a long period of time. So we want you to listen. We want you to listen very carefully, but we also Chazal were conscious, whoever is behind this, was very conscious of the facts of how people work. If they listen, if they're able to listen, they focus. I mean, today we know, we have a lot of evidence about this, the attention span of people. So he says like this. So we could say space out, make hafsakas, that's not good enough. So what we do is we say dafka to bang out what? To remind us of doing a pu'ula, to remind us what we're doing when we're saying this Megillah. So it's a cute chap, so to speak, in it. It's because really we don't want you to be mafsik, but on the other hand, we don't want you falling asleep, he says. Lamashal, he goes even further. We know Purim is coming up, so a lot of the minhagim that was done was to keep the kids awake and interested. So to make a Megillah, we want the children, we want us to get through. So now you could say, listen to the Megillah, they're not going to listen. But if the whole Nakuda is they would do this banging and stuff, everyone knows the kids, from a young age, they're like waiting, listening till the next Haman. At least they listen somewhat. Maybe it's not good. Maybe they should be listening to the whole thing, but they listen more than if they would not have this ability to bang. So there's a very cute the hair in part of the aspects. He obviously he says it out much better than I'm saying, and I'm ordering it down, but he brings this out very nicely. And so it's part of also dafka. That's why it's the children. So the point is we're doing some aspect we're reminding ourselves the whole time during the Megillah what it is that we're doing. We're doing this not only Shem Shalom Yaakov, also we're doing Machatimcha Zecher Amalek, and so part of it is with the actual bang. Okay, now, interestingly enough, there's a work in the Flois Mitaris Hashem Yisbarach, which Yadua Rabban Kotler was very fond of it. So he also talks about what's happens to kids. They do it their graggers. He calls them mechoniot. So he says like this. It's again, Zachar is Asher L'cha Amalek. V'tzarech lasis is a ma'isa b'payil. He says another nakuda. You have to do a pula. Why? It will help you remember. Just like by Shabbos, Shabbos and what do? We drink wine. So to do a zeicher b'payil with this. Now, what's happens to children? So So he has a reason for that. And then he says also they held their hands up. The kids, they hold their hands up with it. Similar to remind us with Moshe Rabbeinu what was going on by the war with Amalek. He held his hands up, and we know what happened behind that story. Now, one more nakuda in all this, which back to the Margolis in his sefer, he brings sort of from the some sefer, is that there's a nakuda which we find in numerous sources based on the Ramban, that we do pu'ulos down here to cause effects upstairs. And then it goes to and happens downstairs. What do I mean? I'll give an illustration. There's a minig among many people when they say Paiseh Hasidecha during Asher, which we know is a school for Parnasa, they open up their hands. Because they want what's pshat? They're opening up their hands to show we want Hashem Yisbarach to help with Parnasa. So when an action is done down here, it has, so to speak, in Kabbalistic language. Upstairs, it has some type of effect, causing something to happen in the physical world. So when we make noise, when Haman's name is mentioned, it triggers for Hashem to destroy Amalek and our other enemies. This is loosely Nakuda based on the Chassam Sofer, based on Ramar Golis. This also is behind this whole Nakuda of what's going on, and that's Viter with Shem Sham Yirkav, what's behind it with a Russia, with back to, I quoted earlier, with the Nezar Kodesh. So it comes out, to conclude, it's very, very interesting. We have a minig, and this plays out in numerous minhagim. We have a minig, which Tak over here, after going through this, has early sources, and its early sources goes way back, possibly to, and just the way the din is how the minig plays out, how is it done? But it's all going back to a pasuk and Mishlei when you mention the name of Russia, what to do. And we see that there was someone that Taka did when he mentioned Nebuchadnezzar's name, he would curse him during the Megillah Ayat Hefsek. So you discussed it. But the problem is, even a Hefsek Aher, but the point is, it's Mavalbal cause of problems. So we see that alone, Paiskim wanted to abolish it. We see that again and again, there were other reasons brought up to abolish it. There were compromises, but at the end of the day, one goes around statistically in shuls, you see that the minig is stark. It's going on, it's happening. So this is really, and we'll be signed with this prat, is there's two nakudas. We learn from here in general with Minhagim, and that's what I'm claiming is with the Magen Avram and Sai with the Ramah, they're emphasizing over here. A lot of times you don't think there's something behind the minig. Yes, this is sort of a clash, halacha and minig, so to speak. There is a big clash. But once we have early sources, very far back, it changes up the story. It's not just someone made up, some 100 years ago they did this, and it becomes up as a minig and people run with it. There's early sources, and there's something behind it. So certain people, it got out of control, and it constantly, it's Adiyom gets out of control, and throughout the generations it got out of control. And there's fears, but still there's something behind it, and we see Lamashal, if you look carefully in this Margolis, there's dafka for the children, and it's to help not only the children, the adults, to stay into Gufa, the Nakuda of the Hefsek. He's saying Gufa not, because you might space out, you might not listen to the Megillah properly. So there was a way to keep you into the Megillah, especially for the children, which we find is a theme of Pesach too. Anyway, these are some of the many sources that there are at this minig, and Amir Hashem, we should be zeicha to learn all the other makairis about the minig, but this is just some of the story of this minig.